Be in any position that allows you to dissolve in between concentration and distraction. Whether that means sitting cross-legged, back straight, supported or unsupported, or laying down, or fidgeting with something, or moving around. Whatever position or movement allows you to be neither concentrated nor distracted, but just be in your natural state. Observe how your body's feeling. Acknowledge how your mind is in this moment. Without categorizing any part of your experience, just honor what you're going through in this moment. If there's any fear in this moment, or if you struggle with that in general, you have a history of being afraid, having anxiety or panic, having existential dread or other fears that frighten you, if you have worries, anticipations for the future, we'll work on that together. But first, I want you to bring your attention to your heart. Maybe that means holding your hand over it, or listening to your heartbeat inside your body. Bring your awareness there. A lot of fear can be associated with this region of our body, since we feel our emotions so physically. Each part can often be designated, and many parts have two designations. In this region, we can feel a lot of love, of course, in the heart, but we can also feel fear. Interestingly enough, both are valid ways to open the heart chakra. That you can truly and genuinely awaken through fear as you can love. Such is why so many people discover all that the heart has to offer after having gone through so much fear themselves. So, for the next couple minutes, I'd like to guide us all meditating on the ability for our heart to be opened by the fear that we've experienced. In other words, I want us to come to understand just how capable we are of using even those moments that we're afraid to open up instead of shut down or close off. That's something that we're able to do. When we are experiencing fear, it's usually because we have an attachment to something. So think about a fear in your life, or if you're particularly fearless, think about a fear in another person's life. Maybe a person who's close to you, like a family member or a friend. Direct your awareness to what they could be attached to, or yourself, that you're afraid of losing. What is the loss? For example, maybe you have a fear of rejection, and so you have an attachment to feeling like you must be validated by some place around you. You're attached to the validation of others. If you are afraid of closed spaces, then you have an attachment to being able to express yourself freely in all moments and all spaces, having the room to move around and be yourself. And that's understandable. All of these things are understandable, and not all attachments are necessarily bad things either. Because it's a wonderful thing to have validation around us. It's a wonderful thing to have the freedom to move. Our intentions are always good, but we can change our relationship with them in order to, for example, bring validation from within, or understand how much expression is possible from within. Maybe there is a fear of being lost, and so there's an attachment to having a designated place that we call our own. And it's a wonderful thing to have such a home, and an even more wonderful thing to find home wherever we go. So wherever there is a fear, you can ask, what is it that you're attached to, that you're afraid of losing? And if you can recognize what that is, then we move on to our next step. But to give yourself some time to find out what that is, we'll take a few moments of silence together, continuing to breathe consciously. Just holding space for that fear, being curious, no expectations, knowing that everything we do in openness is helpful. Just being open to wherever this meditation leads us is always going to be more helpful than not. So if you feel like you've got the trail, that you're following your fear back into some attachment, we can continue following that trail, and we can ask ourselves, how much of that is in our control? How much of that is just naturally out of our control, that the universe decides for us, you could say. And how much of what's outside of our control are we kind of stuck with, and we feel like we should have control over? And how much have we kind of given up on that actually we do have control over? Not an easy question, but it's important to take a moment to familiarize yourself with. You can ask yourself, does everyone at some point experience losing this thing that I'm attached to? If so, then how can you find what you want in a more out-of-the-box way so that you don't have to depend on something that is ultimately out of your control? For example, with the fear of rejection, does everyone at some point experience rejection? Yeah. Therefore, what about my attachment to validation can be found in more creative ways? How can I find that same validation in things that are not out of my control? Or for the case of claustrophobia, is everyone at some point going to feel like they're in a constrained space? Maybe. But there's also there's definitely room for setting boundaries with other people. You can say that there are places that I don't feel safe, and I affirm my own ability to relay that to others. For the places that I don't need to be in, I can stand up for myself and affirm to the people around me that I get to choose where I want to go. That we empower ourselves to communicate that fear with others so that we can be accommodated. It's not always going to be the case, though, that we are going to have our fears accommodated. But we're definitely not going to have them accommodated if we don't speak up for ourselves, are we? So, of the places that can't always accommodate that comfort level of mine, how can I find the ability to express myself freely and move about in more creative ways that don't depend on my surroundings? And if I can remember what the third example of a fear was, fear of being lost. At some point, am I going to feel lost? Probably. Unless I stay in my comfort zone forever. But do I want to always be exactly where I am, or is there merit in going beyond that? There is merit in going beyond that. If you go outside of your comfort zone, I'm sure that you'll probably get lost at some point in some way. So, how can you find some place that you feel a part of that is yours wherever you go? That's the next part of this meditation. That you engage your creative mind and ask, what is it that I can get that's not dependent on my surroundings? And I'll leave you a few moments to consciously breathe and ponder over that question. The thing that I'm afraid of losing, when it's out of my control, how can I find that in places that I know are always going to be there? For example, someone with a fear of rejection, they may look for ways of empowering their own voice, that they find value in their own ability to validate themselves. If you don't reject yourself, then you'll always be validated. What part of you is genuinely and sincerely supporting your own actions now? How can you find gratitude for that support that comes from within? Can you look back in your life and see all the times that you succeeded because you believed in yourself? That you were able to say to yourself, I can do this. For someone who's claustrophobic, you can ask yourself, how can I find enough space within myself in order to have room to be? How can I create enough inner space so that I feel like there's enough room inside me to hold my experience in all of its different forms? And have there been times in my life where I feel like I've expanded in some direction inwardly, and there was more room to be able to hold, well, space for what I'm going through internally? When do I feel deepness within myself? That would be the next question. And for someone who's afraid of getting lost, you can ask yourself, when have I been able to feel at home even when I wasn't literally in my house or with friends or family? How can I feel like I know where I'm supposed to be, and that's here and now, wherever I go? What's something that I always take with me, that I'm always included? whatever your fear is, I leave you a few moments to then come up with an answer to our previous question, which is how we can find that in other places, and follow that up with the next question, which is, in my own experience, when have I had the solution to that problem before? Breathe consciously as we explore that. At what point in our life did we feel like we were able to answer that question of how we were able to find what we usually get from outside, but in that moment there was something about our independence from that, when you were free from needing to externalize that attachment. For example, in the case of the person who fears rejection, maybe you remember that when you were on the playground as a child, that you had challenged yourself to be able to jump from one part all the way to the other, and other people around you didn't think it was possible. They thought, oh no, you'd fall and you're gonna hurt yourself. But somewhere within you, you were feeling brave and you said, no, I'm gonna try to jump from the monkey bars all the way to the slide, and you did it. And you were able to validate your own ability from your own determination to succeed. And so the question for you now would be, is that brave little girl that jumped from the monkey bars to the slide still with you now? Is the monkey bars and the slide still here now, just in a different form? But instead of the monkey bars, it's now your home that you grew up in, and the slide is now your first apartment. It's just that that little girl has grown up, and the monkey bars have changed forms, and the slide's different, but it's all the same. Therefore, can you find that same bravery at that time today? For a person with claustrophobia, maybe you remember that you were once in a very small, confined place. You had been hiding under your bed, but you had brought a light in there with you, and you had brought some crayons and a piece of paper. And even though the world around you seemed small, your imagination was not. And there was a whole infinite world inside your vision. and there was enough space for you to express yourself freely through your own creative abilities. And so the question for you would be, whenever you feel that you are underneath a bed, having to hide from the world, or trapped in some other way, do you feel like that little boy is still a part of you? And it's just that the paper and crayons have changed into a new medium. And now, instead of a paper, you have the ability to organize something different about your job. And the crayons are all the different techniques that you have to communicate to your colleagues. So if the paper and crayons are still here, just in a different way, is your imagination still there also? And for someone who's afraid of getting lost, maybe you remember a time in which you chose to be lost, that you had ran away into a park and you spun around 10 times so that when you got up again, you didn't know where you came from, because the challenge was to find your way back. And in the meantime, you got to look at the slugs and the caterpillars and the mushrooms and the moss on the ground. You got to walk over the logs, over the streams, climb a tree. That at some level you were trying to find home, but at another you were home already, and you loved the freedom of being nowhere in particular. So you can ask yourself, has that part of you gone anywhere? Maybe you've moved and your home is different, and now you don't feel found when you're at home, but you feel found when you're able to find that community that you really feel gets you. And instead of a forest, you have the jungle of your own mind. So if that young part of you is still there, it's just that your destination has changed and the forest has changed, but it's still there in different forms. And is your ability to have fun with the journey back still there too? And so for the next few moments, I asked you to think about whatever that moment was for you that answered the last question, of a time in which you were able to get what you now need externally, internally. Is that part of you still there? It's a rhetorical question. The answer is yes. Better question would be, how can you bring that part of you out today? I'll leave you a few moments to think about what that would look like today. Consciously breathing. imagine this freedom as a story already taking place within your heart. And you see, not through your eyes, but your inner eye of compassion, how this is possible for you today. Visualize that in your heart. And I am sure that it will awaken. Does that mean maybe being disciplined enough to allow yourself times that you get to be a child? You may take times out of your day to eat good food, to exercise, study. But do you have the discipline to be a child? And you take however long it is that your schedule will allow and use that to bring out that part of your younger self which was capable of finding everything it needed within. Can you take some time play just as you were on a playground, to color just as you did with crayons, or get lost just as you did in nature? And you allow yourself the freedom to be youthful. And that is not a question that I can answer for you. And when you're ready, we'll end the meditation. Thank you for listening. Namaste.